Hey. Wake the fuck up!
Are you done with a dramatic intro? You satisfied with your melodrama, Spielberg? Okay. Good. You see, we got important stuff to get to, namely discussing my newest addiction in a long line of bad habits and choices.
What the hell?
Chivalry 2. Chivalry 2 is an extremely bizarre game that has, for the last 145 hours I've been playing it, captivated me with the high-octane action and slapstick nature of gameplay where you clash against other players in large-scale battles of steel and blood. As many of you know, I don't usually take to multiplayer titles and prefer the ever-prevailing solitude of single-player games where people can't bother me, but it's a rare instance where I actually came to really enjoy this multiplayer-centric medieval combat for a wide variety of reasons, all of which we'll get to in this video. So recline in your seats, my humble subjects, for I shall deliver my royal decree as to why I really enjoy Chivalry 2, and why I can't really recommend it to you. Chivalry 2 was created by Banner Studios in 2021, releasing on the Epic Games Store to the widespread dissent of people who have nothing better to cry about, before eventually coming to Steam. It's a successor to the first Chivalry that came out in the early 2010s, continuing on the fictional medieval conflict between the Agathian do-gooders and the Mason Brigands. The events of this war are told throughout the gameplay of online matches, pitching two large teams of players against one another to determine how the events play out. It's an almost history book retelling of the conflict, where the results are determined through the skill of the players. Or, in reality, how quickly you can mash the left mouse button. There are a handful of modes to choose from. The one where the person rage quits after the first round, the one that controls awfully, and the few that are actually fun, server-hosted duels, last team standing, and team objective. Last Team Standing and Team Objective represent a fantastic experience of large-scale team conflict. The first has two teams of 20 collide in a small arena where every player only has one life. A team wins when all enemies are defeated, or there are more of them than the enemy when the time runs out, granting them a point. The first team to 5 points wins.
Hooray!
Matches begin with tense hesitation. Both teams are trying to weave around one another to attack from the sides, wary of how a head-on attack is likely to end badly for them. There's a short, fragile piece before carnage breaks loose, where both teams size up the odds before one unfortunate soul accidentally tosses his weapon and sends the arena into mayhem. There's explosions of action throughout the map, bodies sent flying left and right, and this first bout becomes a predictor in your team's success. As your numbers fall to 10, you see every last remaining member indicated by this icon. Survivors regroup and maneuver to deal with the dregs in the next oncoming bout, where the skilled and the lucky take to their enemies in small groups scattered across the level. The match then returns to that tangible tension as the player count falls and leaves but one player remaining against the enemy, which usually results in expected failure and sometimes even remarkable success against stacked odds. I had to endure the embarrassment of watching one enemy player wipe the floor with 4 of our guys, helping to carry their team to victory. It's impressive how this mode actually manages to summon some semblance of strategy and cooperation with your team, which is usually like trying to draw blood from a stone in these kinds of games. You develop a rivalry with certain opponents, know who the enemy and friendly MVPs are, and end up experiencing both hilarity and veteran level plays in the same 10-minute match. In short, it's high school dodgeball with flanged maces and limbs spontaneously amputated by a screaming Scotsman.
Scotland forever!
Unfortunately, what does piss me off about this mode is its limited time. As of January 2023, it's soon going to be removed, and I have no clue as to how Banner haven't decided to keep it around. It's so obviously beloved, so widely enjoyed, and much more worth playing than fucking Mounted Warfare. If they're worried about splitting the small player base too much, just ditch this. No one logs on to Chivalry and goes, "Oh wow, I sure look forward to being stuck on a horse that I can't dismount that frequently runs into walls because it controls about as well as a Tesla when it sees a fucking child." This mode is made ever more delightful by the gore. Greater damage sustained to your health meter covers your character more so in blood. If you hit someone in the head on a killing blow, it will either fly off or be crushed into pulp, based on if a weapon is sharp or blunt. Limbs can be severed mid-battle, which leads to hilarious moments where you've had both arms amputated and are forced to go around headbutting enemies to prevent bleeding out. It's not too much to be off-putting and detract your attention from the game, but it's enough to reassure you that your weapon has plenty of killing power behind it. Variety is added to the combat through classes, a staple of the first game. You have a wide choice of the one everyone plays, the Fortnite builder, the absolute sweat, or the spineless coward. While combat ultimately revolves around melee, except for these slimy pricks, each class has additional strengths and weaknesses that help to suit them to specific roles. Footmen are able to move slightly faster when handling one-handed weaponry, suiting them best to using a shield and one-handed weapon, and knights are able to sustain greater damage. Both, however, are susceptible to extra damage from blunt weapons such as the mace and war club. Vanguards have access to a plentiful arsenal of two-handed weaponry, but have lesser health pools than the other two, as well as rely on weaponry that typically moves slower than others despite the greater power behind them. And archers have to spend the entire game sitting in a corner missing 75% of their shots. Apart from when they're aiming at me. Whenever they're aiming at me, they suddenly get Soldier 76 aimbot and interrupt me every time I'm about to kill someone. Oh my god, can you fuck off? Each class has access to a ridiculously detailed arsenal of weapons. Longbows, warbows, crossbows, javelins, battle axes, war clubs, executioner's axes, great swords, mauls, highland swords, dane axes, messers, two-handed hammers, glaives, halberds, pole hammers, spears, sledgehammers, shovels, pickaxes, knives, hatchets, short swords, cudgels, swords, morning stars, falchions, one-handed spears, rapiers, axes, maces, different shields, long swords, heavy maces, pole axes, and much more. All of them come with customizable sets of armor, voices, helmets, heads, facial tattoos, weapon skins, and all you could want to personalize your own medieval expendable. It makes you easy to find amidst the medieval retelling of red versus blue, but also lets you define yourself in a role. In the same way older Battlefield titles did, having enemies fall into specific appearances lets you understand what they are and what they can do with their weapons just at a glance. Vanguards are able to throw incendiary grenades, footmen can deploy healing packs, knights can use horns as an area of effect heal, and archers can try to run, but they will just die tired. These abilities aren't available in Last Team Standing, because if they were, combat would be drawn out for way too long by crowd healing, but are available in Chivalry 2's flagship mode, known as Team Objective. If you look up any video of Chivalry 2 on the internet, whether it's raw gameplay or a meme edit, chances are that it involves footage of Team Objective. It's the go-to game mode that pits two teams of 32 players against each other in an attack or defense scenario, with one team seeking to clear the map by completing objectives in the allotted time, while the others attempt to fend off the attackers until the match is over. The variety of maps to play across is extensive, having you defend the holy city of the Agathians to raiding a Mason torture camp lurking in the mud and rain of a nearby forest. What makes Team Objective really enjoyable is how it's an exemplary example of what makes me love the big battle. I think for a long time now, AAA games have lost what makes the carnage and thrill of running around in this massive bloodied ball pit ultimately so fun. To me, a big part of this is presentation and context. Battlefield 1, in my opinion, is one of the best installments in the franchise. Its flagship game mode, Operations, is similar to Team Objective, attack versus defense style gameplay with two big teams and probably around the same mortality rate. Despite being similar to Rush, a classic of the prior installments in the series, what made Operations so special to me was how it opened. You'd have someone monologuing about their account of before the big battle, followed by a briefing of the upcoming engagement to know what you've got to do, before spawning you all in and having you charge headlong into enemy fire while screaming in unison. It was simultaneously a great way to build the setting, to construct the atmosphere, and also a great way to feel unity with my teammates, charging alongside them to the sound of the advance music. In Chivalry 2, this is similarly designed. While not accompanied by these amazing scores between objectives, a crucial feature that is even tutorialized is the ability to let out a hearty battle cry as you charge in. Hitting the C button while sprinting unleashes a devastating scream of rage and fury, while hitting the button standing still delivers an equally passionate battle chant. These are different for every character voice, and specific to the faction they fight for, which not only shows how much attention was given to this feature by the development team, but also helps the player feel like they're among allies of a similar alignment instead of just a random group of mercenaries. Agathians will cry out about the blue and gold, the Tenosians scream for the Empire, and the Masons talk about killing poor people. The performances vary from good to fantastic, with some of the charging war cries genuinely stunning me from the sheer energy, and help to add an extra layer to the carnage on the screen. My favourite voice by far is the haughty counsellor, who sounds like a very aggravated French person.
Yes? Hi, you interrupted me. I was ignoring you. Barbarians! You can smell them. Just stop. Mediocre at best. You must be accident-prone.
What even further grounds you in the context of a battle are the objectives. Instead of taking a generic capture point by standing inside a designated area, the objectives the team must complete relate to the purpose of the mission. The slaughter of Coxwell tasks the Masons with enacting British conservative homeless laws, so objectives are centred around pillaging, looting and massacring defenceless civilians. The siege of Rudhelm has the Agathians besiege a Mason stronghold, so objectives involve destroying fortifications and escorting siege weaponry to the necessary locations to forward the assault. The coherence of the objective's nature and the nature of the mission really sells your involvement in this pivotal battle in a fictional war. You could even say you are immersed. Which is a word I've refused to use for the past 2 paragraphs because 1, this word is terribly overused for really mediocre experiences, and 2, this game is just so fucking silly. Time and time again, I have witnessed the weirdest, most peculiar and ungodly things in this game. People running around beating one another with chairs, setting each other on fire with chickens they put inside a fireplace, catapults sending people flying into the stratosphere, bodies glitched on spike traps, people killing their own downed teammates, shields being tossed like frisbees, horses knocking over entire groups of players, some people just playing instruments in the middle of a battle, and an endless array of bizarre ways people play this game. Never before in my life have I fought against a level 500 player who was using a chicken, lost to them, and found myself having fun despite that. The level at which the player can interact with the environment is insane. Being able to drop hazards on players' heads, place and destroy obstacles, as well as pick up anything nearby and use it as a weapon, leads to many a funny scenario. I've been beaten to death by a flute, I've been crushed by a bell, and I've been killed in numerous ridiculous ways that I have never even thought possible. And that is something I just have to credit this game for. It's self-aware of its tone. Imagine trying to sell some gritty multiplayer medieval warfare, while also letting players 360 you with an axe across the arena. It just wouldn't work. Chivalry is a game that's aware of how ridiculous it is, and is able to keep up both the somber note that this is a bloody battle where hundreds are going to die, and also that it's the goofiest gang warfare between 2 bands of deranged clowns. Team Objective is a never-ending metal orgy, and Chivalry 2 doesn't make the mistake of trying to present itself as anything more than that. That being said, there always does feel like there's an advantage to the attackers. Rarely I ever see a defending team win because points are just so hard to take back from an attacking team, and sometimes it feels like the defenders have to deal with so many different ways for the attackers to gain entry that it's almost impossible to actually pull off a successful defense unless the enemy are just straight up trying to lose. Does it bother me a lot? No, and it doesn't really detract from the experience, but I can see why it's cited in Steam reviews as being very frustrating when you're predestined to lose. However, this is just the beginning of the Chivalry 2 experience. After a few hours of mashing left mouse button and getting repeatedly killed due to your team's lackluster support, you start to search for entertainment in other modes, and eventually stumble upon something called a duel server. When you're lost in the throes of yet another metal orgy, there's really little reason to pay much attention to the combat mechanics of the game. Sure, when 1 against 1 you have to make precise judgments on incoming attacks and how to respond appropriately. But you're never one-on-one. Instead of 2 people consenting to clashing swords, there are 31 other opponents that feel the need to give a second opinion on your slapping blades and punctuate their dissent with a big fuck-off axe. Realistically, you're not going to last to see the end of a duel, so you just want to start mashing buttons with the occasional overhead and stab to hit as many unaware enemies around you as possible before the same happens to you. But if team objective is for the drunkard football hooligans, duel servers are for the refined swordsman where revelry is sought in both shenanigans and bloodshed. In duel servers, the full potential of your arsenal and training is realised. Let me explain with a demonstration. This here is Squire. Say hello, Squire.
Do you honestly think you're fucking...
You have 4 directions of attack, left and right, up and down. Clicking your left mouse button lets you alternate between horizontal swings, while using your mouse wheel allows you to perform an overhead or a stab. Overheads typically do slightly more damage, while stabs are excellent for re-engaging an opponent across empty ground, but both are less accurate than their slash counterparts. A quick tap of the spacebar lets you dart away from any incoming swings, which takes a heavy bite out of your stamina. A key defensive tool in your arsenal is blocking. Holding the right mouse button will protect you from enemy attacks as long as you aim in the direction of the oncoming swings. However, this does drain your stamina, and using block too often will eventually deplete the bar. When the bar is low and you take a hit, your weapon will fly out of your hands and you'll be left vulnerable to attacks from the enemy. Another way to open one's block is with a swift kick to the groin. Kicks are used to circumvent an opponent who blocks too often, opening up their guard for an extended period so you can get in a swing. However, kicks don't interrupt an enemy who isn't blocking, and do very little damage for such a long animation, meaning if you kick too often an enemy can anticipate the incoming boot and swing through your move. The alter ego of the kick is the jab, used to deliver a swift punch to the face of your opponent. This allows you to interrupt an enemy who is attacking too often, dealing very little damage that is delivered quite swiftly that can be increased with use of shields or other one-handed tools. However, jabs are extremely short range regardless of a weapon, and repeated jabbing will only tell the opponent to block. The key to longevity in duels, however, is countering. When an enemy attacks, blocking and using the same corresponding attack will trigger a counter. This regenerates some of your stamina and also doesn't push you back away from the opponent, letting you close the distance if the enemy is using a two-handed weapon and trying to stay away from you. Take it from me, the only way to survive in most fights is to be countering your opponent wherever possible. The reason I'm giving this mini tutorial is because I want to showcase how in-depth the combat is for this game. It's remarkably complex, but also reassuringly easy to grasp over time, as well as not requiring you to break your back 20 different ways to hit your opponent from an impossible angle. As fun as the large-scale shenanigans of war are, the fact you're all constantly mashed together means you have very little room to experiment or enjoy the fullest potential of the combat system. There is a combat tutorial made by a well-known skilled player called Ziggy Larter that is almost 2 hours long. This game is so much more than frantically clicking, and as fun as Team Objective is, a part of me wishes the mechanical complexity was visible through that. Joining these servers for the first time and dueling opponents, working my way up from clueless newbie to someone who can put up a decent fight against skilled clan players, was made worthwhile through learning the fighting mechanics over 100 hours and having tangible success from doing so. This is a game that rewards you for countering and being aggressive, even when you're on the defense. I've played this game for so long, I've actually seen familiar players get better over time. They go from someone I can endlessly counter until their stamina falls to a genuine opponent that I have to do my best against. There's this one guy called Hamza that's like renowned in the community because despite the fact he is tangibly getting better, he has not learned to flourish in the last 145 hours I've seen him in duel servers. And that's the next thing I love about Chivalry 2 duel servers. The social aspect. Duel servers have a matchmaking parallel that pits you against an opponent in a one-on-one to reach 5 wins. The problem is, however, that it's not really that fun, especially not when half the opponents will quit after the first round of getting dumpstered. It's a lot of staring at loading screens more so than actually being able to play the game. Duel servers are more akin to a large virtual room where up to 30 players can come in and pick a partner to fight with, as well as move around a map to different locales for their fights. It's a nice feature that integrates you more with the community. There are 3 maps for duel servers on rotation: Courtyard, the Tournament Grounds, and the shit one. The Schoolyard cliques move throughout the spaces in search of worthy opponents, and I've spent so much time in them that I can usually profile a player based on class, appearance, or weaponry. Vanguards in default uniform are either the shittiest players known to man, or a literal god of the keyboard that knows exactly when to feint into a heavy the moment you think they're not going to. Yellow Footmen and Green Knights are typically new players that have joined to start getting into duels but haven't made enough in-game cash to start customizing. Knights that look like this and have this name will demolish you time and time again, whilst either being extremely polite and sociable or the biggest twat you've ever met in an online space. Greatsword users will never stop spinning, and people that use the rapier only do it so they can use the special on you. War Club users are a blight on humanity, and Quarterstaff users... What makes these spaces fun to be a part of is the blend of social and competitive nature. In 1 minute you can go from fighting for your life in an intense battle of skill to admiring 2 players following you around with bushes in their hands. You'll see a group of friends hitting each other with a bell, you've got players dancing, and familiar faces will wave hello to you as you approach. The emote select wheels add a lot of character to the interactions, able to laugh and cheer and plead for your life in comical fashion. Again, Chivalry 2 understands its own tone, and realises a game so overtly violent and bombastic can only ever really be a little bit silly. In my book, that's great. Being able to have a bit of fun between duels makes it more worth engaging with than just endlessly fighting. What also ties into the social aspect is the mutual rule to duel the other players. In order to fight, both people must flourish their weapons to indicate they are ready to battle. If one player doesn't flourish or indicates they don't wish to participate, they are to be left alone until they otherwise show they want to play. The emotes convey this information quick, clearly, and make it easy for you to find an opponent that wishes to fight you. You'll find no shortage of characters in these servers, from players that want to fight you with the most obscure instruments, to silent brooding opponents that will lose to you repeatedly despite using some of the best weapons. And then you come across this guy. This guy is always in a duel server. He stands around, just watching everyone play, and you think he's waiting for an opponent. So you kindly go up to him, you flourish.
Thou art of passing skill. Put these foolish ambitions to rest.
I think why this is so appealing to me specifically is because it feels inviting. You recognize other players, you develop friendly rivalries with some, and every match will ultimately find a new way to make you laugh. Chivalry 2 mechanically is such an intriguing game, but if you have no one to share it with, well, what's the point? Well, in my 145 hours of playing, I think I've realized why this is a problem. It's an unfortunate truth of the internet that niche games about war, especially medieval fighting games, tend to attract a certain demographic of online weirdo. And just because I can already see some unhappy fellow typing very angrily in the comments, no, I don't think it's wrong to play this game, and I don't think playing Chivalry 2 immediately indicts you as some sort of bad person. That's a dumb thing to say, which is why I am not saying it. It's the truth, however, that while not everyone that plays this game is an arsehole, there is a strong prevalence of dickheads within the community, specifically those that frequent duel servers. The first example that comes to mind for most are FFAers, Chivalry 2's version of Gmod RDMers, where calling one out in chat feels just about as pathetic, but nonetheless is still quite a problem. I usually don't care, because most of the time these guys are kind of funny, running around taunting, punching people in the back of the head and scampering off. But sometimes you really do feel like you've been made a target by someone. I've had games where every FFAer on the planet goes after me, and it does compromise your ability to enjoy the game. Not all FFAers do it to piss you off. Some genuinely don't realise what kind of server they're in, and a big reason why that is revolves around the chat. While PC players are unfortunately able to bear witness to the bizarre specimens you get in chat, the silver lining is any oblivious FFAers are able to be told and understand that it's not a free-for-all. Console players, however, cannot. It makes it nigh impossible to communicate with console players that don't understand where they are, meaning that a lot of these console players will still keep massacring the server because they genuinely don't understand that's not what they're meant to be doing. But you see, while most people put a lot of onus with problems in the dueling community on FFAers, I think a lot of the toxicity really is owed to just the general behaviour of most of the players, even those that are considered to be some of the best in the community. Sometimes I'll beat a player and they'll come kill me mid-duel because I've insulted their honor. Other times they make it so impossible for me to tell if they want to duel me, and when I jab to get their attention, I get treated like I've murdered a family of 4. In fact, I did this to a guy who was shooting me with an arrow, which then led to him killing me and getting the lobby to kick me from the match. This guy here is threatening to call up his buddies to join the server because someone killed him for FFAing, which is made even more pathetic when he did this to me the night before this recording, where he got a pal of his to hop in the lobby because I killed him once for FFAing someone. I've never met players that are seemingly so toxic in their interactions with one another, but simultaneously so sensitive to getting hit in a video game. I don't want to ever hear again that people on Twitter are the snowflakes when Chivalry 2 players are right fucking there. All of this, to me, is a big indictment on my ability to enjoy this game. There's only a handful of times I've gotten to fight someone that isn't a complete asshole over winning or losing a virtual battle, and the fact that this toxicity is so commonplace on the top rungs of the skill ladder doesn't have good implications for how rancid it can be down at the bottom. When I'm having to avoid some high skill players because they've had me removed from lobbies for beating them once, it just feels like I'm playing in a hostile environment, and that's not always particularly fun to be doing. I bring this all up because in a game that is centered on interactions and playing with others, such a large proportion of toxic engagements puts a strain on how much a player is willing to stay invested in their own success with the game. I'm not unfamiliar with how people online can be, and I like to think I'm pretty thick-skinned when it comes to dealing with them. But you have to understand how bad some of my experiences have been when I've had to leave lobbies to take a break. That's the first time I've had to do that in a multiplayer game ever. And I've had full-grown adults tell me to jump off a bridge since I was 9 in Modern Warfare. But despite this, I've also spoken to some people that haven't had as many bad experiences as me. People who wager that this community really can't be any worse than any of the other big league multiplayer games like Valorant, CSGO, Call of Duty, and so on. And while I have some minor issues with this comparison due to the overwhelmingly large differences in player base sizes, I do actually think that it may not be totally fair to write off this community purely because I've probably had some bad luck and encountered more dickheads than usual. All multiplayer games, unfortunately, have issues with their player base to varying degrees. It's an inherent problem of the industry when you market to capital G gamers, individuals that tend to boast the online social skills of an extroverted KKK member, as well as have a problem showering. So instead of penalising Chivalry 2 for suffering from an issue most games have, I think it's better to look at what tools are available to help deal with problematic players when they arise. Unfortunately, this is where the problem gets worse. An essential tool in video game lobbies is the ability to kick troublesome players from the session. This feature is available in duel servers, where you can place a vote to kick on someone that has disgruntled you, typically an individual who killed you in the middle of a duel. This feature is extremely robust, useful, and not at all abused by a turbulent community. I'm taking a piss, it's pretty much useless. You see, because some of the players can't see the chat, any context given towards a kick isn't seen. This means that if the lobby is predominantly console players instead of PC players, people may choose to not kick the guy who's targeting me for the 20th time because they don't understand why I'm doing it. This also worked conversely, where a troll can place a vote kick on you for any random reason, and console players may very well decide to kick you from the server for absolutely nothing. It's the Salem witch trials led by the fucking village idiot. Sessions are either kicking out every single name that has the misfortune to be voted up, meaning it's likely you're gonna get kicked for some random reason at some point, or no one's getting kicked and the lobby slowly fills with FFAs until all the good players leave and it's just you fending off a horde. The tools in place to deal with these incidents are extremely limited, and honestly they're poorly implemented. I was just about to say that a potential solution would be to let players run and moderate their own servers, which, while likely to be better in the long run, I trust a Chivalry 2 player to fairly moderate a space as much as I trust Matthew Walsh around a child. Torn Banner does suggest that players use recording software to film people misbehaving in dual servers so action can be taken, which I take issue with for 2 reasons. 1. While it's reassuring Torn Banner does vet their community through having footage of bad players submitted, it's not a complete replacement, and sometimes it feels like that's what this is. Some people can't record these people. They don't have the necessary hardware or resolution, or don't even have anything available. Some people play on console and it's not even an option. so this really only benefits the PC portion of the community, and even then, it's not exactly foolproof. Which leads to the second reason. I had the misfortune of encountering this individual during a play session on the 5th of January. This user, who was a well-known member and high-level player in the KRT clan, started posting really bad stuff in a public server chat. Now, this is a video essay, it's not a call-out post, and usually I don't name these people because they're unfortunately a dime a dozen in this era of the internet, and they don't deserve my time of day or a slot in this video. But the severity of the things that were being said by a supposed high-profile member of the community that were also being met with zero challenge not only says a lot about the willingness to tolerate alt-right rhetoric in these kind of games, but is also a massive cause for alarm. This guy wasn't making an offhand joke about immigrants. This was literally him agreeing with the Kalergi plan. The fucking Kalergi plan. After spending the session trying to kill him in the middle of his duels, which was met with me being killed by other high-level associates of his who seemingly didn't give a shit, I got in touch with Torn Banner with the screenshots I'd collected. They took all the evidence, assured me action would be taken, and then the ticket was closed January 10th. So imagine my surprise when, that very same day, I go into the duel servers, and this guy is still playing with his clan buddies. The problem with this moderation tool is the supposed moderation policy. That means moderators aren't able to tell me what or when action's going to be taken. This means that potentially they never did anything about this guy, and he's still playing the game, which means I can never be sure if there was any point to even bothering to record this guy, and if they did, what's the problem with me knowing that someone was banned for their neo-Nazi roleplay? If you don't update people on the cases they bring to you, they're going to assume nothing has been done. That's why you give people something solid, like a date when action was taken, or what action was taken, so there's no confusion, so that you know something has been done. For all I know, this guy was banned the second I hopped off the server, but because I haven't been told anything, I have no reason to assume anything has been done with the most open and shut case of vile internet behaviour I've ever witnessed in my 10 years of sharing online spaces with these lunatics. The potential practical reasons for keeping those that report players to you in the dark are outweighed by the trust you gain from just telling them what's going on. And this all pisses me off because players like this guy are worse than the FFAers. The high skilled players entrenched in clan groups that will have their buddies defend and protect them are so pathetic and are everything wrong with this community. Yeah, it can be quite frustrating to have someone repeatedly kill me for seemingly no reason and then hide in a bush waiting for me to start another duel before killing me again, but it's infinitely more upsetting to see someone practically show off their shrine to a 1930s Austrian painter and then no one cares, because skill in something that isn't real and has no bearing on the world we live in is treasured more highly by idiots and morons than the repercussion of someone's espoused hatred and facetious self-victimization that has negative impacts on the overall online space that we inhabit. This individual deserves to be permanently banned from this game, not because I'm a random assortment of political buzzwords that have been thrown together in some fool's attempt to insult me, but because, and some of you need to buckle in, this might take a moment after hearing this, racism is wrong. But the fact Torn Banner don't tell me what they're planning to do and when they're planning to do it doesn't inspire confidence in how well the prevalent problems of the community get moderated. I spent all that time through this video praising the game's mechanics and combat system because I genuinely love how easy it is to understand, but how it takes actual time and effort to try and master. I enjoy playing so I can spend more points on upgrading my cosmetics, making my weapons look cooler, on laughing at someone I killed in my evil little French voice. But when I am forced to share all of this with people that are hopelessly toxic, with people that hardly raise an eyebrow at a high profile member espousing genocidal views, but then call you an idiot because you looked at an FFAer, I repeat, looked at an FFAer, it's hard to find much enjoyment in the experience. This mode really is the only way to be able to appreciate the complexity of the fighting system, but you have to navigate so much toxicity to truly enjoy it against an equal player. I would like everyone watching to know that my one truly positive anecdote of this game's community, and I mean this, was me discussing furry porn with another player. The highlight of my positive experience of Chivalry 2 duels is that I bonded with another player over fucking Stedelnik. So, can I recommend this game to you? No. Well, if you're someone that's a little bit insane like me and are willing to put themselves through the self-abuse that is this game's community, or you enjoy being a part of these massive metal orgies instead, then I'm sure you'll be fine. Ultimately, the game is fun when you're with the right people, and if this isn't your first rodeo with shitty communities, you can navigate it just okay. But if you're someone that is perhaps a little bit saner than most, someone who isn't particularly fond of getting killed 10 times during a duel just to then be kicked by a racist because you jabbed them once, then I admire your better taste in games, and I implore you to stay the fuck away. Seriously, just play Guilty Gear Strive, it's got really good music and you get to see Biken's tits. But some of you are little freaks, aren't you? Some of you are sitting there vibrating with rage, frothing at the mouth to ask the fateful question, well, if you dislike Chivalry 2 so much, what about Mordhau? Alright, fine. Let me tell you about Mordhau. I do not give a fuck about Mordhau.